Victoria and David Beckham have been married for over 2 decades. With all the fame, pressure, and constant spotlight on their lives, you'd expect some communication breakdowns, right? But they have found a way to stay connected. And there's been one key habit that keeps their communication strong. It's no accident that their marriage works. Great communication is the foundation of their relationship as well as any other strong marriage. And today, I'm going to show you how you can instantly improve your communication. It's simple, it's practical, it can begin to make a difference the day that you start. And it's important because communication breakdowns negatively impact every marriage at some point. We all know what it's like when communication isn't working in a relationship. Maybe you and your spouse try to talk, but the conversation quickly turns into frustration or ends with one of you feeling misunderstood or mistreated. And the worst part is these bad conversations start to pile up on top of each other. They create this distance between the two of you, and silently you find yourselves living in the same house, but not really connecting. It's like every conversation is a minefield and you never know what's going to set off the next argument. One moment you're talking about something as simple as dinner plans, and then the next thing out of nowhere, you're in the middle of a full-blown argument and you have no idea how you got there. Over time, this kind of miscommunication takes a toll. You start to feel like you're talking, but your spouse isn't really listening. Maybe you feel like you're frustrated or even bitter because no matter how hard you try, every conversation seems to end the same way. You start to avoid certain topics just to keep the peace, and that only makes the disconnect worse. Eventually, you find yourselves drifting apart emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and in every way. And if you've been there, you know what that feels like. That feels like loneliness. You're living with this stranger instead of the person you once fell in love with. But the good news is there is a way to fix this. Here's where things start to turn around. Just like David and Victoria Beckham, who mastered staying connected, you can implement a simple strategy to instantly improve your communication in your marriage. And it's called the 2-minute rule. And I know what you're thinking. It sounds way too simple, but oftentimes the things that have the potential to bring the most transformation in our lives aren't that complicated. It actually comes down to whether you are the kind of person who is willing to first take the time to learn these tactics and second, follow through by doing. Let me explain how this works and how powerful it can be. At least once a day, for just 2 minutes each, you and your spouse take turns focusing on each other. The rules are simple. No distractions, no cell phones, no multitasking, just 2 minutes of uninterrupted, intentional conversation. And during this time, one of you speaks while the other one listens. And here's the key. Whoever is listening cannot interrupt. Sounds easy, right? Well, it's probably a little bit harder than you think, but I promise you, if you do it, it's a game changer. And here's a pro tip. You've maybe read or heard of the book, The Lord of the Flies. And I'm not suggesting that you go full barbaric on each other and start killing one another like the kids on the island. But there's one thing those kids did that could actually be really helpful in your marriage. If you remember the conch, whoever held the conch was the one who got to speak, and no one else was allowed to interrupt them. Well, you and your spouse need to adopt a version of that. Call it the talking stick or a coin or whatever you want, as long as it's something that when one of you is holding it, it's that person's turn to have 2 minutes to talk, and they are the only one who talks. The other person is to just fully focus and listen on them. Me and my wife personally do this. We call it the pen because we simply use a pen. I know, we're super creative. Most people know how to talk just fine, but when it comes to listening, it's a whole different story. This is where active listening comes into play. When you're the one listening, you're not just sitting there waiting for your turn to talk. Instead, you're fully engaged. You're making eye contact. You're nodding. You're showing that you're following along. Even though you aren't talking, you should be actively involved in this conversation. This will show that you're truly understanding your spouse's words and their feelings and not just hearing what they're saying. And if you want to go even deeper on this, how to do active listening and how to do it well, I've got a whole video that breaks it down step by step. But the main key takeaway is this. During those 2 minutes, you need to be an active participant in that conversation while you are listening. And I mean this that your spouse actually feels like you understood him or her. Each person gets their turn to speak uninterrupted, and that's what makes the 2-minute rule so powerful. And now that you understand the 2-minute rule, there's something you need to watch out for, because if you're not careful, you could be doing everything right, going through all the correct motions, but still feel like it's not working. And that's because there's one common mistake that couples make when trying to do this, and it can actually make things worse, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. So first of all, why does the 2-minute rule work so well? It's simple. When you're truly present with your spouse, even just for those 2 minutes, it sends this powerful message that says you matter. Think about it. How often do you get someone's full attention these days. Between cell phones and work and every other distraction known to mankind, it is rare. But when you take just 2 minutes to fully focus in on what your spouse is saying, that you actually care. And over time, those 2 minutes start to build into something much bigger, and you'll find that your conversations get deeper, your connection gets stronger, and you start to feel like you're truly on the same team again. 2 minutes might seem like nothing, but it's a foundation. It's one that will grow stronger and stronger with each conversation. And of course, you can do this more than once a day. It's important, though, to remember that each person's time to talk doesn't go past those 2 minutes. And that's because most of us can't focus for much longer than just 2 minutes. Now, obviously, as you get into the habit of this and you start to feel pretty good about it, you should take it to the next level by implementing the other elements of active listening, like summarizing what you've heard your spouse saying in your own words. But again, for that full breakdown on active listening, watch my other video on active listening after you finish this one. And if you really want to get the best results from this, you need to find the right setting. Some couples communicate best while sitting together after dinner. Others, it might be going for a walk or perhaps while drinking your coffee. Find whatever feels natural for you and your spouse. And the timing matters too. Maybe it's first thing in the morning, or maybe it's later on in the day just after work, or maybe it's right before bed. The key is to stay consistent and to find what works best for both of you. Don't let me or anyone else tell you when or where you need to do this, as long as you're doing it in a way that works for you and your spouse. So I told you earlier, there's one thing that can make this go wrong, and here's what it is. If you treat the 2-minute rule like a task that you need to get through instead of an opportunity to really connect, it can actually make things worse. If you've ever been to church and you've had that moment where the pastor tells you to get up and shake somebody's hand and hug your neighbor and say hello and how you doing and God bless and whatever else, it's meant to make everyone feel welcome, but a lot of times it has the opposite effect. And that's because people feel like you were forced to say hello to them and you wouldn't have said it otherwise. And the reason you feel like it was forced is because it was. People can tell when you're doing something because you have to instead of because you actually want to. And the same thing is true within your marriage. If you treat the 2-minute rule like it's something you have to do, your spouse is going to feel like you're really just going through the motions. And that can make them feel even more disconnected from you. You need to avoid that. And the way to do that is to approach this whole thing with a genuine attitude, a genuine intention. Don't just sit there and get it over with. Be present, be engaged. Use those 2 minutes as an opportunity to really connect with your spouse. Not because you have to, but because you love him or her and you want to. And when you do that, these 2 minutes become something that you both look forward to every day instead of dreading. So the next time you and your spouse have the 2-minute conversation, ask yourself, am I really present right now? Or am I just doing this to check off the box? Because your spouse is going to notice the difference. And now that you know how to instantly improve your communication in your marriage with this 2-minute rule, there's something else that you need to know. This rule is extremely powerful, but if you don't learn this next crucial habit, you could be missing out on its full potential. If you want to take your communication to the next level and make this rule even more effective, then click here to learn how to get one step closer to the marriage you've always wanted.